Good evening, and welcome to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm an employment law and business law attorney, and I host this weekly podcast and talk radio show every Tuesday night at 5 p.m., where I have interesting guests who discuss topics that are very relevant for business owners and entrepreneurs, particularly in these challenging times as we navigate the unknowns and the new normal that is the COVID-19 pandemic. And my guest tonight, I'm very happy to welcome my colleague, Attorney Jeffrey Margolis. Jeffrey, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. That music was so relaxing. I'm going to have to snap back and get ready. Appreciate the invitation, Eric.
Sure thing. And I'll note that some of that background music playing before the show started, I think was just you and I were privy to. So some of our guests may not have heard that in the audience, but I'll have to tell them it's quite the intro that really gets guests into a good space, good zone for sure.
Another thing they were not privy to was that I lost the picture and the connection. So I had about 8 seconds. I was scrambling to get back, back online.
Well, glad to have you back. Didn't miss the beat. No, didn't miss the beat.
My resident tech, also known as my wife, came to the rescue. So thank you, Karen.
That's great. So special thank you to Karen Margolis for your assistance in technical issues today. Great, Jeff. And so I want to give you a proper introduction for our audience listening or watching tonight. As I mentioned, my guest is Attorney Jeffrey Margolis, founder of the Margolis Law Firm. And after practicing with several major international New York City law firms, Jeff founded the Margolis Law Firm in 1983. Wow, wouldn't have guessed it. Jeff has often counseled major multinational companies, as well as law firms, information technology companies, foreign investors, and New York City businesses, both large and small, with respect to immigration and consular law. He has shared his expertise in this area by frequently lecturing before bar and trade groups, as well as authoring cutting-edge articles. Jeff also maintains an active transactional real estate practice, which allows him to counsel clients on real estate-related visa options, such as franchising and the EB-5 investor program. Now, for the past 30 years, Attorney Margolis has been an active member of the Association of Immigration and Nationality Lawyers, and he has received the AV highest rating as to his professional skills and ethics from the distinguished Martindale-Hubbell Law Directory. So with that, Jeffrey, I'm glad to have you on the show tonight. It's a real pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. So let me just tell our audience and listeners tonight what our topic is. The topic and the episode that we're doing tonight is about employers and immigration, what you need to know. And some background on this is as follows, that in the time since the COVID-19 pandemic hit the US in 2020, many businesses have dramatically altered their workforce, where they've been switching to and hiring remote employees who could work virtually from anywhere, including other countries. Other businesses had employees on various work visas who are now resuming their duties. And 2021 brought about changes as well from a political standpoint with a new administration in the White House. With all the above circumstances in flux, immigration law has been a relevant topic during all phases of this pandemic and continues to be important for US businesses and employers to know about. And so in this episode, as I mentioned, my guest tonight, Attorney Jeff Margolis, and I will discuss what you need to know as an employer or as an employee, for that matter, navigating the immigration laws that govern businesses. So with that background, let me ask you an introductory question, Jeff, if I may. Jeff, just can you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself, mainly what prompted you to form your own law firm?
I was fired from my old law firm.
Okay.
So they say from adversity can come whatever. And more to the point, I think I discovered that, I'll put quotes around this, I was somewhat unemployable and that I like to make decisions about myself and how things were done and client relations. And if you're part of a firm and even if you're a senior associate or a junior partner, your options are limited in terms of how you direct the functioning of the firm. Sure. So what was I going to do? Was I going to go back to a large law firm that I had left to join a small one? or something else. And I say the stars were aligned in the right way. I had just gotten married to Karen,
Mhm.
a working wife, no children, and a rent-controlled apartment on West End Avenue that I had inherited from my stepdad.
Mhm.
So the thought was, let's try my own practice. And if after a year I haven't made much of a dollar, then I could get a job somewhere.
Right.
So that was 82, 83. That's a
Mhm.
long time ago.
Sure.
And I tell people when I first started, an old beat up desk, a couple of dusty law books, the phone would ring. Is this the Margolis Law Firm? I'd say speaking, because the, the whole organization was me, myself, and I. So
Right.
we've grown over the years, and it's been terrific having these two specialties, the immigration and real estate. We're going to focus on immigration, but I'll just mention that one thing that this dual practice has allowed me to do is work with many, many wonderful foreign startup companies
Mhm.
where we've formed their LLCs, for example,
Mhm.
and let's say a French retailer negotiated the retail lease on Madison Avenue, and then with the visa aspect of our work, we've obtained visas for their first group of managers to come over and
Mhm.
get the business rolling. So that's been a lot of fun. It's a special niche. And looking back over all those years, I would say I think I made the right choice. And it's off topic, but if anyone listening wants to know about setting up his or her own firm and get some tips and traps, I'm happy to be a resource.
Sure. That's a great background, Jeff. Interesting story. That is true about adversity can form the basis for something positive, and really brought back some fond memories. I started my practice in April of 2001, and I remember just very bare bones, right, basic, working from home at the time. That was an apartment that I shared with a good friend of mine for I'd known since third grade, and we're renting a place, and just the whole. I remember then getting a small office, but hearing what you're saying, your story sounds like the firm's loss was like your client's gain. So glad to hear here it is, 38 years later and still going strong.
Real estate is wonderful, but people skills
Mhm.
and really making a great difference in someone's life, that's where the immigration really shines.
Yes.
Because if you can get someone in that right immigration status, keep them here maybe after graduate school, allow them to go out and maybe start their own businesses,
Mhm.
maybe reunite a family.
Mm.
This is real flesh and blood consequences of our work, and it's been so rewarding. And when people talk about how uh, are taking jobs from Americans and this and that, I have a wonderful statistic to share with you if you're not frozen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now? You froze there for a minute, but I
I
heard
can.
everything.
Could
We could hear you. I just couldn't. Your picture froze, but it's all good now.
oh,
Uh-huh.
okay. I was just going to share a wonderful statistic that if you look back over the last 25 years
Yeah.
at companies with a capitalization at this time in excess of $1 billion,
Mhm.
83% of those companies were started by
Mhm.
uh, foreigners, quote unquote. So everything from Google with Sergey Brin on down, even Apple, Steve Jobs' father was an immigrant. And I think it's really wonderful to point to these success stories, and helping navigate that immigration system is a foundation for many of these companies' later successes.
Absolutely, Jeff. I hear you about the flesh and blood. There's real people involved in the work you do. What I'm hearing you say, it really creates some good positive outcomes in terms of people's future, their ability to have a business. And I think that, people listening here tonight, this evening to our show, and maybe folks who listen to the recording, they might be themselves, perhaps immigrants from other countries looking to start their business. They might be here on a work visa, which we can talk about those issues. But great to hear that, that you're really vested in people's futures. And I know that, this pandemic has been a big topic in all areas of law. I'm an employment law attorney, as I mentioned, and my clients are business owners and employers who have seen great changes in the law and what's required from them. And I was wondering if we can perhaps get to this next question I have for you, which is, what would you think what have been some of the biggest immigration law challenges posed to businesses during this pandemic to date?
I'm going to give you some thoughts on that, but if you don't mind, before answering that one, can I can I give a shout out, if you don't mind,
Of course.
to President Biden,
Yes.
who has totally changed the personification and color of the immigration situation we have today. I mean, I'll be a little bit facetious and call him the anti-Trump.
Right.
Because if you think of the Trump administration as having a maniacal interest in dismantling the immigration system
Yes.
and curtailing immigrant benefits and entries in every possible way, Biden as the antidote is such a welcome relief to all, whether you're talking about a refugee or a business person. And I don't know, I think one of our later questions is going to be about what changes have we seen with the Biden administration, and I've got a very good long list. So when you talk about the pandemic and the challenges, they've been there, and a lot of those challenges remain as a legacy of the Trump immigration policies. So, for example, let's talk about inability to get cases processed, slow down of the administration process. Let's talk about bans on issuing new visas that have been enforced by the consulates abroad, or even if you can get a visa, issues relating to entry, because, for example, if you're from a Schengen country, for example, which is basically most of Western Europe, you're not allowed to re-enter the US for 14 days. So this might mean sending a client to Mexico for 2 weeks. I mean, Cabo ain't so bad, but if you're corporate executive, that's a loss. And one understands. I mean, there's science involved here, and when the pandemic was raging, certainly to be careful about who we were admitting and what the consequences might be of people entering who might be carrying the pandemic diseases. But now I think we'll see something of a relaxation of those bans, and I think overall we're this proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. So we could talk about problems during the pandemic. I mean, obviously there were a lot of people were not even traveling. If travel is good for business, including people here on, for example, work permits who travel as a concomitant to their job duties, many that travel was restricted. We switched over to Zoom, as we're doing now, and frankly, that was pretty successful in many cases, but not all.
Right.
To do business, you sometimes really need to be face to face with your colleagues or with the person here on the other side of the deal.
Let me just try me, Jeff. Pardon me, 1 second, if I may. We, believe it or not, are at our first commercial break, so I want to make sure that you have time we have time to delve into these issues when we get back from the break. You've covered so far the start of a lot of good issues there. The ban on new visas, the slowing down the process, and what's happening now. I want to talk about all those things, give you a chance to talk about all those things. But first, let's hear a word from our sponsors. So you're listening to Employment Law Today here on Talk Radio NYC. My guest, the very talented, experienced attorney, Jeff Margolis from the Margolis Law Firm. So stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you interested in having a better relationship with yourself, others, and God? Greetings. I'm your host, Dr. George Andow, for the show A Journey Through into Awareness. On my show, we journey into the awareness that the mind of God is the true seat of our personal consciousness. We join together each Monday at 7 p.m., so tune in on Talk Radio NYC.
Did you know that nearly 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. battles mental illness? Hi, my name is Albert Daba. I'm the host of the show Extra Innings. Extra Innings, I discuss the topics of wellness, mental health, and the experience of surviving multiple suicides within my family. Listen live every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern to Extra Innings for discussions with sports figures, artists, mental health professionals, and many others. That's Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today, and I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm here tonight with my guest, attorney Jeff Margolis, founder of the Margolis Law Firm. Jeff is an immigration and real estate attorney. His firm focuses on those practice areas, among others. And we were just talking before the break a bit about Jeff was describing some of the biggest immigration law challenges posed to businesses during like the COVID-19 pandemic, and mentioned the issues around bans on new visas, slowing down processing of immigrants' applications. And I wondered, did some of that speed up from the pandemic? I know a lot of these things originated with Trump and a lot of his, frankly, anti-immigrant policies, which, as you mentioned, Biden was a huge antidote to. But would you say that the pandemic may have given fuel to that fire of restricting immigration?
Certainly, because, you know, xenophobia. And
Yes.
remember the movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where the father kept saying Zano, Zano, which was referring to his future son-in-law as, you know, someone who was a foreigner. But when you have from the top down in the administration, kind of decrying immigration and belittling the people who are immigrants and saying we're protecting society by limiting immigration, which you know was not the case. I think I'd have to agree with you. I mean, if you're saying did the pandemic, you know, kind of like inflame anti, you know, immigrant sentiment, his remarks about China, you know, Kung flu and these totally terrible, you know, statements he would just come out with without much forethought.
Yes.
But again, the good news is, of course, the best news is we have a vaccine and we're seeing the resumption of fairly normal activities. And in the context that we're talking, I would say, for example, consular processing, which was at a complete halt for a year. Now, those consulates are starting to interview people again, issue visas, families are being reunited, work permits, work-related visas are being issued. So, yes, there's a tremendous backlog, and anyone who's sponsoring anyone these days can expect substantial delays, but
Mm.
we're moving forward.
Right, right. It's interesting because even pre-pandemic, I think under the last administration, under Trump, frankly, there were a lot of policies designed to sort of based on and also to fuel the narrative that immigrants were taking from the country and taking from employers, when in fact, as we know from history, it shows us the opposite is true, that often we gain
Aaron,
from
understand.
talents and skills. Can you hear me, Jeff? I see your screen's a bit frozen. I think it's better right there. This is one byproduct of the pandemic, is that Zoom can be hit or miss sometimes. I think we're good now. I can see you and hear you well. But I think that
I was about to smash my computer because I thought it was my internet instability. So, okay, I'm glad to know.
not
It's
sure
at
if
your
it's
end.
not sure where, but at least we're good and we can hear you now just fine. But no, but for sure, I think that you mentioned, for example, like say work related like
Okay,
visas. I
wait for
think
them.
that as companies start to come back with more employees, let's say hiring from overseas, I think now that we have much more remote working situations, I wonder if there will be any changes in terms of an expansion of work visas that people can apply for, like H and O rated visas, as far as you know?
Yeah, there are all these initiatives, and this American Immigration Lawyers Association, our kind of trade group, is pushing in every way, along with business trade associations who sincerely believe that if we can't capture the best and brightest out of schools, for example, the H1, typically the H1B candidates, we're losing so much. You may know that Canada,
Mhm.
seeing our backlogs and inability to service our best and brightest, they now have a 2-week fast track for STEM graduates.
Hmm.
So,
Mhm.
our loss will be the gain of some other country, and I don't think we can really afford that. But
Right.
you might be interested to know, have I said that
Mhm.
before?
Yeah.
I'll
Mhm.
stop saying.
It's
Um,
okay. Mhm.
Obviously, someone working from abroad
Uh-huh.
has no US immigration issues.
True. Right.
So that is something attractive, perhaps. But now we're seeing certain jobs are going wanting. We're seeing the labor market seems to have been constricted, contracted, smaller,
Yep.
and that will sorry
Mhm.
that will encourage employers to reach out and maybe hire more foreign workers. Notwithstanding,
Mhm.
hiring a foreign worker is more complicated, takes more time. You have that expense to note. So one, I hear people say again about those foreign workers taking American jobs. Any savvy employer who
Mhm.
has a really good American candidate is going to say, hey,
Mhm.
I'd much rather hire this person than have to deal with the vagaries of the immigration system.
Mhm. Right. And it's an interesting point, Jeff, that when people are working 100% remotely from another country via Zoom and they're not here in the US, it's a different from an immigration law perspective than let's say if that person is now, let's say, for example, a company that's like going back to in-person employment or a hybrid situation. And maybe they're hiring people who now are perhaps coming to the company and for example, let's say intracompany transfer, which I think is that an L visa when say somebody is like an employee, like it's like saying like in say Britain, and the US company says like, hey, we need you to fill up a spot, a position over here in the US, and then you have a question of the visa paperwork and such. But I think it's interesting to see that these restrictions that we saw pre-2021, that there's now a leaning towards opening and expanding. I know that the Biden administration, if I'm not mistaken, has put a freeze on some of the outgoing Trump executive orders and attempts to restrict immigration, and is also looking to broaden the scope, the ability to bring people onto companies. Yeah.
I agree. And your visa categories. I may need to add you to my team as an extra It's an extra
Counsel,
good pair of pants. Yeah, that is the L. Only sometimes talk about the alphabet soup of immigration
right.
because you have A's and B's and C's and H's and L's and O's. Sometimes when I'll give a lecture, it'll be the ABCs of U.S. immigration, for example. I also, when I give those lectures, like to start the lecture by saying, "Good morning, fellow immigrants." Good morning, fellow immigrants, because if you look at where we are from, it's often just an occasion of when your forebears got here and how they got here. Was it the Mayflower or was it a jumbo jet from Guayaquil, Ecuador? But here we are.
Yep.
And one reason we're here is that when all is said and done, in terms of opportunity,
Right.
the United States is still the golden Medina, as my ancestors used to call it, the promised land, the land of opportunity.
It's interesting. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, that to recognize our commonality as, well, eventually, somewhere along the line, somebody came over here from our families. I know for me, my father's side was Polish. My mother's side, her parents came from mixed the Czechoslovakian and Austrian Hungarian. So it's good to see that, the country, I think, is hopefully starting to shift towards a more broad-based welcoming policy. And it's funny you mentioned alphabet soup. This is a little aside, but in employment law, we have the exact same expression because so many federal statutes, you have the ADA for disability, the ADEA for age discrimination, you've got the PDA for pregnancy, the NYSDHR for filing complaints. So I can definitely identify, I think a lot of areas of law have these, alphabet soup, as you call it, alphabet. But I think that, there's just like a lot to unpack here in terms of like saying updates like from the Biden administration, in terms of any changes that you might see looking ahead. We do have to take, believe it or not, a commercial break. We've got about a minute or so, but
we have all this material to cover. We can't take breaks.
we'll get to it, Jeff. I promise.
You know that I'm enthusiastic. Okay, I will now mute myself. And as I tell clients, if you can mute a lawyer at will, that's often a very good thing. So
right, right, and something that clients will miss when the days of Zoom are outdated. So, well, folks, you're listening to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm the employment law business law attorney, and my guest tonight is attorney Jeff Margolis, immigration law and real estate law attorney. So stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Do you run or are ready to open your own business? Hi, I'm Jeremiah Fox. I've been operating and opening small business for the last 25 years, and I'm the host of the new show, The Entrepreneurial Web. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time for insights and stories on the nuances of running small business right here on Fridays at noon, talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Wise Content Creates Wealth. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Friday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 2. They say content is king. Well, wise content rules the world. Every episode features tools and tips for content marketing and business people telling the wise content stories of that success. Tune in every Friday from 1 p.m. to 2 on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back, folks, to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney, here tonight with fellow attorney Jeff Margolis of the Margolis Law Firm. And in discussing immigration and what companies and employers can expect moving forward, Jeff had noted to me that he has some initiatives he'd like to speak about and basically illuminate for all of us in terms of the Biden administration. So Jeff, with that, I'll say the floor is yours. Feel free to lay it on us.
Thank you. I want everyone to know, only for you, Eric, would I put on a tie and a business shirt. I mean, this is something. It's a rare.
I'm grateful.
Rare avis. Okay, so I thought for this broadcast, maybe I should, in addition to saying Biden has launched a number of initiatives, maybe I should cite a few specifics. So
Sure.
If you'll allow me, and within his first 90 days, he had a flurry of initiatives, executive orders and legislation that he put before Congress. It was really awesome that you'd have such a focus on immigration. And I guess if you look at the Biden campaign, he certainly emphasized how he would be handling that subject very differently than his predecessor. So what did he do? Within the first few days, he revoked the Trump's administration travel ban, the so-called Muslim ban, which had been applied to the citizens of a majority of Muslim countries on day one. Interesting, some cases that went even as high as the Supreme Court did not necessarily strike down the ban if it was worded in a certain way. So you couldn't say it was Muslim ban. It was just some kind of less objectionable, at least objectionably worded ban.
Right.
He restored and strengthened the DACA program. Are you familiar with the DACA program, Eric?
Oh, yes, the Dreamers. There's quite an issue.
Dreamers, yeah. These are children who entered the U.S. illegally, typically, with their parents.
Right.
And the purpose of DACA, as passed by Obama, was to relieve these children from fear of that they would be deported, made them eligible for work permits. Trump tried to eliminate DACA, saying that Obama had exceeded his authority, perhaps, but those efforts were blocked by the courts. So the courts were of the view that these were lawful executive orders. Now, Obama, as I said, strengthening the DACA program, and many are optimistic that this is one pro-immigration piece of legislation that has a chance of being passed by the House and Senate. There's pretty universal agreement among these politicos that these kids who really did nothing themselves that was wrong deserve some kind of a break.
Sure.
We talked before about Trump rules that banned many visas from being issued during the pandemic. Nothing to do with whether the applicant had the flu or didn't have the flu, just broad bans on the issuance of visas. He's rescinded those rules. The creation of a task force to try to reunite families rather than separate families at the border.
Sure.
You've seen the newscast. This is a Sisyphusian, if I may use that expression,
Yep.
job, even with the best of intentions, to try and keep track of these children entering without parents and do justice, which is in the overall view of things, what we're looking for from our leaders.
Sure.
What we see is that Biden on these issues, and again, if someone says Margolis was so political in
Oh,
his view of these things, mea culpa, I am.
Hard to
And
discuss immigration without, getting political. I mean, it's a topic I knew is politically charged, but I think very important for business owners and employees to understand. So go right ahead. And also you're preaching to the choir too, by the way. I'm very, very glad that we're over the Trump years. Knock wood, fingers crossed and all, but.
Well, he had an advisor, Steve Miller, who himself was the child of immigrants.
True.
Yet Steve Miller was obsessed with perhaps eliminating immigration. So
Right.
I won't play Steve Miller's therapist, but I will say that the fact that he was Trump's chief architect and advisor on these awful policies, we are very happy Mr. Miller is seeking other employment at this time. What else we got here? Creating a task force for families, and some good technical changes. For example, passing rules that reduce processing time for green card, trying to make applications flow more smoothly. If I can give you one example,
sure.
The tradition with the Immigration Service had been if an application for, let's say, an intercompany transferee, you mentioned that L had been filed and approved.
Right.
Now it's 3 years later, it's time for a renewal extension of that petition. At the old law concept you remember from law school, res judicata.
Sure.
Meaning that the matter had already been decided. The case had been approved.
Yep.
So when you did the extension, let's not doubly and triply scrutinize it, because we've already, decided that all the proper qualifications were in place. Under the Trump administration, the word went down to the deciders, to the officers in immigration. No case was to get that benefit. Every case was to be reviewed and adjudicated from point one, which had some, aside from the delays that created, it had some anomalous situations. For example, petition approved in 2017 or 2016, and the same job, the same person,
right,
etc., case denied in 2019 or 20.
Yeah, right.
So this may not sound like much, but if you think about how many renewals and extensions there are, it's really been helpful. Lastly, it's important to talk about the big kahuna, that Biden proposed a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented aliens in the United States. So this, in fact, his proposed law is called Pathway to Citizenship. It was, if you'd like a couple of details, it's an 8-year pathway, and you had to have been here as of 2021, apply for a green card after 5 years, pay taxes, show that you can read and write English to some reasonable level, and get a green card, one day become a citizen, take these people out of that kind of netherworld
that
of
sort of
existing
in between a gray area.
without paperwork.
Right. If I may, Jeff, what I hear is that I hear a lot of sweeping changes in a very positive light. And I hear that the policies and the changes really impacting immigration on both the personal level for individuals and their families, and also for the employers, the businesses out there who employ these people, immigrants, on work visas. I think it's important to note that immigration policies can impact, workers who are working in agriculture or farming or working in low-level, quote-unquote, low-level jobs, no judgment there. And it could also impact, you saw with the travel ban, for example, in 2017, pre-COVID even, the horrible impact that restrictive immigration policies can have on high-level executives and immigrants who maybe were out of the country and then could not get back in, and the way companies were suffering from the loss of their brain power, their work. So I hear you're giving us all a good rundown of the big picture and all these different changes ahead. Sounds very promising.
Thank you, Eric. Apropos, we
Mhm.
just dealt with the CEO of a publicly listed company,
Mhm.
South African National,
Right.
um, thought that he was never coming back. I mean, he got to South Africa,
Mhm.
he had a visa, it had expired. So the idea was get an interview in South Africa for the new visa
Right.
and re-enter. Well, the consular authorities in South Africa basically said, we're not interviewing you or anyone else until December.
Mhm.
And also, even once you had that interview, you
Mhm.
had something called the NIE, which was the National Interest Exemption or Exception,
Mhm.
which you needed to get so that you could return to the US without that 14-day quarantining in another country. This
Mhm.
is in addition to testing, negative for the coronavirus. This is simply, that was simply a roadblock to getting back to his job here. So
Hmm.
from undocumented kitchen workers to CEOs of publicly traded companies,
Mhm.
every day immigration has a tremendous impact on American business.
On business, and as you mentioned, on our fellow immigrants, people from all walks of life who've come here, for in search of a better life, and the companies that hire them as well. So it might be a nice time for our next commercial break. And when I come back, I'm going to speak with Jeff, and he's going to tell us a little bit about how his firm can help companies to resolve immigration issues. So you're listening to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. Stick around. You're on Talk Radio NYC, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law, business law attorney, and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Do you love or are you intrigued about New York City and its neighborhoods? I'm Jeff Goodman, host of Rediscovering New York, a weekly show that showcases New York's history and its extraordinary neighborhoods. Every Tuesday live at 7 p.m., we focus on a particular neighborhood and explore its history, its vibe, its feel, and its energy. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. As I mentioned, I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm an employment law attorney for companies and business owners. And joining me tonight As you've been listening, my guest, attorney Jeff Margolis, founder of the Margolis Law Firm, just been offering immigration services, business immigration included, and real estate services to his clients for over 40 years, the last 38 of which as his own firm. And Jeff, I wanted to ask you in the last segment here until 6 when we wrap up, the question of how does your firm help companies to resolve immigration law issues like visa issues and such?
Yeah, thank you. This is what they call a softball. This is, let's hit that one. So that it doesn't come off as too egotistical. I'll just talk generally about how good firms work with clients. But one, I would say, whoever you're using for an advisor, go to someone who knows what they're talking about, has the technical proficiency. Two, is available to, really listen, and listening skills. When I talk to young, newly minted lawyers, I say, try to listen and get an idea of what the client's problems are, because I think the most successful lawyers, whatever the field, employment, immigration, real estate, whatever, are those who are seen as problem solvers. They're taking in the facts of the case and eliminating roadblocks. And the more experience you have, I think the better you as an attorney are at fulfilling that goal.
Sure.
We try to be proactive. So, for example, Eric, you well know about the I-9 form. That's the employment eligibility form, which every employer is supposed to have every employee fill out.
Right.
The idea is to determine whether or not that person is legally authorized to work. And the I-9 was supposed to be a very simple form. Interesting. The I-9 was born in 1986. I don't know if you knew that was its birth date.
I didn't know that was a birth date. No, but
April 12th. Well, you obviously have never sent a card or call.
I didn't. I missed the last 35 years. I feel terrible.
But since we're talking about a possible amnesty, if I may use the A word, the last amnesty was 1986, and it was under President Reagan, conservative. And what Reagan said is, look, at the time, interesting to note, there were 3 million undocumented people. 6, we now have 11. He said, yeah, we'll do this amnesty, but going forward, we really don't want to be a beacon, continue to be a beacon for illegal entries. So we'll impose sanctions on employers who hire people that are not legally here.
Right, true.
So it was a two-sided sword: amnesty for those here, sanctions against employers who hired illegal people undocumented. So how are you going to find out if somebody was undocumented? They said, we'll have this form, it's I-9, you enter information, who are you? What's your current visa status? You show proof of employment eligibility. Maybe it's your birth certificate, you were born in Ohio, maybe it's your US passport, whatever it may be, temporary work permit.
Sure.
And these forms are notoriously not completed properly.
Yes.
It's very grammatical. But what's the consequence of that? You're now out of compliance, and over the years, there have been many, many audits, government audits of companies' I-9s. They say, give us your I-9s, and we'll look through them. Are they completed correctly? Are they signed in the right place? Did you look at appropriate evidence? And failure to run that I-9 program properly can lead to civil penalties.
Correct, yes.
And in some cases, if it's really an egregious kind of a thing, criminal sanctions. So we'll go into a client's conference room, say to HR, give us 6 boxes of I-9s. Who did you pull out the ones that need to be fixed, so that if there were to be an audit, they could proudly show their I-9s and know that they were done in compliance. And sometimes we're called in after the fact. There's an audit, there's an intention to fine, notice of intention to fine, and we'll try and help the client kosher, so to speak, those I-9s. So being proactive. We have newsletters that we send out about recent developments. We encourage clients to call just with questions, even if it's not a new case, just to keep things clear, our business clients. And we also really get to know those business clients, which I think is very helpful, meaning to write up a very successful case, I think you have to understand the client's business. And we make a point of trying to do that. So what's our approach? It's caring professionals who want to make sure that every I is dotted and T's crossed. Because nowadays, what used to be, maybe a 40-page application is a 400-page application. We're practicing defensive law. We're trying to make these applications bulletproof so that we don't get notices from the government about deficiencies. And the more you do, the better you get at that.
Yeah. It's interesting, Jeff, because those audits, I can attest as an employment law attorney, having had clients in those situations where an audit for immigration proof of work eligibility and status, it could be triggered from various places, right, as we know. So for example, an employer might have a Department of Labor issue. Maybe somebody claims they're misclassified, they file for unemployment insurance, or someone claims that the company is not paying proper wages. And in the scope of an audit, they might ask for certain payroll records or even payment records. And if a company doesn't have the I-9s or properly, credentialed workers who are allowed to work for them, it could be very problematic. So I think it's important what you're saying about the proactive approach, making sure that companies are hiring correctly, and also the responsive approach, what to do when a company made some mistakes and how do you help them to correct their I-9s and other documentation. I think it's all something that we're going to see even more issues going forward as companies begin to rehire and hire from other pools of labor from other countries. So I think it's great. And funny you mentioned the softball question. I do give a couple softballs. I never fashioned this show as a hardline debate, probably because I'm in litigation, so I debate and argue throughout my days, and it's nice to be able to just elicit information and have a conversation with observations and back and forth. So, I think it's interesting you talk about, you mentioned earlier about helping clients with their HB1 visas and work visas and such. So I can see that all coming together for clients, especially as we go into different changing times, with the pandemic abating. I want to give you a few minutes or a couple minutes just to tell people how they can best contact you and to share if you have any upcoming talks to give or events, or the couple minutes. The floor is yours, Jeff, if you want to talk about that.
Well, thank you. And let me first say thanks for giving me the opportunity to be on your show. And you've been a great questioner and host, softball and not so softball. I hope we've been able to give some good information to your listeners out there. It's funny to say, how do you get in touch with us? Well, until recently, you had to go to Idaho, Texas, Connecticut, Westchester, and points northeast, south, and west, because we had no one in the office. We had our entire team was dispersed. As of June 1, we're starting to come in. In fact, now as we speak, the two people who really, if you don't mind my giving a shout out and a kudo to Scott Goldsmith and Caitlin Mullen, those are the two really fabulous immigration lawyers who run the practice. I got my name on the door. I get to sign checks, but these are the people that used to learn from me, and now I learn from them. So again, very astute and caring attorneys. We're at 11 East 44th Street, right off Madison, when we're in a regular office. And we have a website which we're redoing. It's margolislawfirm.com.
Okay.
We are available for any of your listeners who just would like to call and ask some questions as a courtesy to you and the program. We'd be happy to give some information.
Sure.
And again, when I'm giving that lecture to the newbies, to the newly admitted lawyers, many of whom don't have jobs, so they're they're going out, maybe setting up their own practices, not voluntarily, but just to get some momentum going. And what I say is, get attached to some mentors.
Yes, important.
And in my own case, I'd always like to say, I'm happy to be a resource to the community and to other lawyers. So thank you again for allowing me to be on your show.
Jeff, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us. A pleasure to have you on tonight and to hear the updates and information about immigration law. It's what's changing, what things were like, what they're looking like going forward. Really great to have you on the show. So we have come to the close of our hour, believe it or not. Got about a minute or so left just to say to our audience, that the show is recorded on Facebook Live. And so you can go to facebook.com/talkradionyc to watch this, or the website for talkradionyc.com. That's talkradionyc.com. And I'm Eric Sauver, host of the show. Tune in Tuesday nights, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for guests that discuss issues impacting businesses today. Once again, everyone, Jeff Margolis from the Margolis Law Firm. Pleasure to have you on the show, Jeff.
Eric, can I add one further thought? When you said, Jeff, you want to come on for an hour?
Yep.
I said, Eric, what? I said, well, how are we going to fill this hour? We're going to run out of, I'll run out of material, even bad jokes. He said, Jeff, it'll go faster than you think. And it certainly did. I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure having you on the show, Jeff. It was great to hear your everything you had to say, and we're actually out of time at the moment. So wishing everyone a good night, and we'll be back here next week. Jeff, thank you once again. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC.